Okay, that sounds positive. So welcome to what do farmers and landowners in West Yorkshire really think about supporting nature, and thank you for coming. Street Space and Nifty Sustainability have been commissioned by the West Yorkshire Combined Authority to listen to farmers and landowners across West Yorkshire to inform the local nature recovery strategy. So if we go to my picture, if possible, my name is Sophie, I'm from Street Space, and I'll be facilitating tonight. I'll tell you a bit more about our organisation later, but for now, perhaps let's just begin. So tonight is the showcase event to share back with you some of the things that we've been hearing through engaging with farmers and landowners across West Yorkshire. We've been working on the project since November, and it will provide one of the first steps towards supporting the West Yorkshire Combined Authority to create a well-informed and locally rooted local nature recovery strategy. Farmers and landowners, of course, have the potential to make a lot of impact on helping to support nature. So that's why we've been listening to farmers and landowners from the very, very beginning, before the West Yorkshire Combined Authority come to write this strategy. So tonight we'll be sharing what we've heard, and we'll also be sharing it more widely with other people, which is why it's being recorded. Tonight is also a chance to share your views, and these views will help to inform our final report that gets handed into WICA to inform the strategy. So please do share what you think with us and other people on this call today by writing in the chat. We are interested in hearing what you agree with, what you disagree with, what points you think are the most important, and if you think that there's any points that we're missing. We want tonight to be as generative as possible, so please feel confident and comfortable to express your points of view in the chat. And we are here to listen to them and feed them into what we're learning. That being said, please make sure that all of the comments that are made are respectful, as what we will be sharing today with you are the experiences of real people, and it's important that these experiences, feelings and opinions are respected. Of course, you might have another opinion or experience from your life, and that's okay, but it doesn't make someone else's experience invalid. The chat will be monitored by Jen, our colleague. We won't get the chance today to respond to every comment and question, but they will feed into our final report, and any unanswered questions within the chat will circulate the answers via email. If we don't have your email address and you do want to receive these updates, please send me an email and I'll share with you my email address at the end of today's event, or someone will put it in the chat just now. So let's have a quick look at the agenda to look at what questions we're going to be answering today. Very quickly, we're going to be answering what is the local nature recovery strategy? How have we listened to farmers and landowners in West Yorkshire? What have we learned from farmers? What have we heard from landowners? What does this mean for the local nature recovery strategy, and what will happen next? Now, if we start then with what is the local nature recovery strategy? Unfortunately, our client from the West Yorkshire Combined Authority hasn't been very well, so he's unable to attend this evening, but we did manage to create a last-minute recording with Justin Wilson, who's the Head of Environment and Infrastructure at the West Yorkshire Combined Authority, who is going to explain to us a bit about what the local nature recovery strategy is.
Welcome everyone. Sorry I can't be at the event in real time. This is a pre-recorded kind of intro, but hopefully just give you a bit of brief overview of the West Yorkshire Local Nature Recovery Strategy, which obviously some of the engagement that's been taking place with the team is going to feed into. So just in terms of background, local nature recovery strategies, they're a new tool. They've been rolled out nationally by government, and in total there'll be around 48 across England, one of which will be the West Yorkshire Local Nature Recovery Strategy. And in terms of the West Yorkshire Combined Authority and the West Yorkshire Mayor, they were appointed as what we're calling a responsible authority, so the lead authority for preparing the LNRS in kind of June last year. And the aspiration is to publish the final local nature recovery strategy by 2025. And then there'll be a period of kind of monitoring and evaluation to see how it's working, what's not working, and then feeding that into a kind of a successor document, a second iteration. And at the moment, government are quite kind of vague and loose about the timeline for that. But broadly, they're saying that within the 3 to 10 year window, that's when you would potentially look at refreshing your strategy. But obviously, it's dependent on the kind of success or the need to refresh it locally. So the diagram on the right hand side of that slide that's on screen now, that just outlines kind of the process that we're going through, and very much the first element of that at the moment, we're in the kind of prepare stage in terms of stakeholder engagement and data collection. So kind of a lot of the attendees on the call might have a good understanding of biodiversity, but kind of just to put it into a bit more context. So it's obviously key to a lot of different areas of work, whether that's kind of flood protection, plant life, cleaning the air that we breathe, kind of water content and clarity, and also in terms of nature recovery, it can help a lot of different elements. So whether that's food security, kind of the storing and capture of carbon through carbon sequestration, and also kind of more resilience to climate change, ultimately as temperatures potentially increase. So whether that's wildfires, flooding, extreme heat, so kind of biodiversity and tree cover can help with kind of cooling. So there's a multitude of benefits there, but obviously in terms of the local nature recovery strategy, biodiversity gain and enhancement is the main thing that we're looking for. Just briefly, just in terms of policy context, I mentioned that the Combined Authority and the Mayor have been kind of designated as this responsible authority that's leading on the preparation of the local nature recovery strategy. But it's important to note that this isn't just something that's been given to us by government. It has been, but also it's something that as a political leader and as an organisation, we're quite strong on anyway. It's something that we're fully aware of. We identified a climate emergency a number of years ago, and following that we launched our climate and environment plan, which has a range of kind of proposals within it, looking at everything from carbon reduction, looking at kind of what we can do on the transport sector, and also making businesses more resilient. And also there's the biodiversity net gain agenda, which does link with the local nature recovery strategy in that's almost the delivery element of this space. So the LNRS sets out the opportunities and the areas where we could go from a biodiversity improvement point of view, and the net gain mechanism and the credits within it are the mechanism where those improvements are actually made. So that essentially kind of attempts to offset the biodiversity loss that occurs through new development, whether that's housing or kind of employment development, and puts that into areas of most value, which the LNRS will identify. Just very briefly, a few kind of just a bit of in a nutshell what the LNRS will be. It's a strategic document. It's not prescriptive. Even if the LNRS identifies an area for biodiversity improvement, it isn't kind of mandatory. It doesn't tell landowners what to do. It's purely within their gift as landowner or kind of another stakeholder who says what they do with their land. It's not a permission, it's not an allocation in that kind of way. But what it does try and do is agree priorities across the whole stakeholder network into something that everyone can kind of own and sign up to as a way forward, an agreed position almost. But again, it's not binding and it's not a delivery plan either. The delivery element, as I mentioned earlier, is through the biodiversity net gain kind of mechanism. Yeah. And quite a complicated diagram here, but this just shows the types of habitats that the LNRS can kind of what's the word now, deliver. So there's three scenarios. There's the kind of the existing biological kind of ecological site that we might want to enhance, make bigger. So that those are the larger areas on the diagram on the right of the screen. There's new habitats that we can create. So say if a habitat's been degraded completely or is a missing link, we can generate a new area or propose a new area is generated. And then the third scenario, very broadly, is the stepping stone approach, which are the smaller elements in the kind of the middle of the screen, where you can connect two or more existing areas of habitat by creating stepping stones between them, so that allows species and habitats to flourish and move between these corridors. Very briefly, I think stakeholders, there's a lot of kind of different people involved with the landowners, or could be involved with it, and there's obviously a massive overlap between some stakeholders and the kind of end users or delivery kind of entities, and obviously the landowners, farmers are key to that process. And you see that very much in the middle of that Venn diagram there, in that they have a dual role, stakeholders that we need to engage with and understand their kind of wants, desires, opportunities, challenges, but also they have a key role in actually delivering some of the proposals in the LRS as well.
Cool. So we just heard from Justin
welcome everyone.
The end of that video, how important it is for us.
Welcome everyone. Sorry I can't be.
Sorry.
No, it's okay.
Just stop share and reshare again.
Yeah, that's fine. But we just heard from Justin there on how important it is for the West Yorkshire Combined Authority to engage with both landowners and farmers, both right at the beginning of this process, because they're the ones who have the most potential to help them support nature across West Yorkshire. I'm going to now tell you a bit about how we've listened to farmers and landowners through this project, but first want to touch on who we are. So we are a collaboration between Street Space and Nifty Sustainability, and we've been commissioned by the West Yorkshire Combined Authority. Street Space is a pioneering community engagement and collaborative design social enterprise based in Bradford, and we work alongside communities to sensitively listen and create collaborative, inclusive and inspiring visions for the future. We've been working mostly on the engagement with farmers, and we've been working with Nifty Sustainability, which is a community interest company that brings together expertise in social science research and activism to co-design participatory research to create change. You might notice that our experience isn't in farming. We're not usually well connected in farming networks, and still to this day, honestly, we do find it quite hard to get our head around some of the different schemes and acronyms that relate to the farming world. But we do know how to facilitate a good and honest and sensitive and productive conversation and really listen to people. Through working with us, the West Yorkshire Combined Authority wanted to try something new and see if our experience could change the way that they're engaging with farmers and landowners across the region. So what we aim to do is really improve the quality of the conversation that they're having with farmers and landowners, but also reach out to people who don't typically get involved in these conversations, and hear a huge range of people, not just the groups who are kind of quite well practiced in having their say in policy. So let me share with you what we've done. We began then by making lots of let me run you through these statistics. We have engaged with 280 people between November and February, attended 11 events, conducted 31 interviews, received 53 responses to our online survey, hosted 3 drop-in events, 1 farm walk and 1 pop-up event, and we hired a young farmer as part of our engagement team, who you'll be meeting later on. Okay. We began then by making lots of phone calls and reaching out to people to map who we need to speak to and to learn a bit more about how people want to be engaged with to inform our approach moving forwards. Next slide. Also, very early on, we hired Nathan, a local farmer from Haworth, as part of our engagement team. Nathan has been working with us from really very beginning, helping us to build and deliver an engagement plan with farmers that works for them. With our knowledge in engagement and research and his knowledge and experience of farming conversations on the ground, he's been super valuable. Next slide. From there, with Nathan, we went to as many events as possible to meet people on the ground. Some were really fruitful. We met lots of interesting people who wanted to be involved in these conversations, and some were less fruitful. but it also helped us to learn even more about how to best engage with people throughout the project. So we went to Tree Plant with the Colne Valley Tree Planting Society, we went to Holmfirth Auction Mart, we went to Skipton's annual sheep charity auction. We did loads of things to meet lots of people in real life. Next slide. From here, we then set up a drop-in in Wharfdale Auction Mart. This is a stage where we were really getting to know the conversations that we were having. We offered free bacon sandwiches and hot drinks to farmers in the cafe as they came to buy or sell cattle. And through this method, we really wanted to be there consistently over time so people could build trust with us, but also make it really easy for people to come and talk to us. And so that we were going to people and we didn't ask people to take too much time out of their day to be involved. Next slide. We also hosted a pub quiz in a farm quiz with pies and peas and 2 groups of young farmers. Nathan created a really interesting nature quiz, which was followed by a more serious conversation amongst both young farmers and their parents and us about their ideas for supporting nature and some of the barriers that they face as well. Next slide. We also hosted a pop-up at the Yorkshire Agricultural Machinery Show. We had a gazebo, we took with us a provocative sign, and we spoke to passers-by, some are in the room today, hello, about what you really think about supporting nature. Next slide. So throughout all of this, Nifty have been doing a great job of zooming in on landowners of different kinds across the region and holding interviews to hear their perspectives. This has included speaking with Yorkshire Water, University of Leeds and Bradford, Bradford City Council, the NHS, Calderdale Council, and some more. Next slide. And finally, we hosted a farm walk on the snowiest day of the year, where in collaboration with the Yorkshire Agricultural Society and the Yorkshire Food Farming and Rural Network, we visited Philip Rowbottom's farm in Wakefield to see his impressive no-till farming, different diversification methods, and some of the work he's doing as part of some of the SFI schemes. This brought together different farmers and different organisations as well, like the NFU, WICA and the Yorkshire Agricultural Society. Next slide. We also tried some other methods, which I'm going to not talk you through all of them, but it included an online survey. We did paper versions of the survey for those people who don't have access to internet. We did online and offline newsletters as well, letters in the post, Facebook groups, and visited farm shops as well. Just got a couple of final comments then, as a way of reflecting on the approach that we took throughout this project. A couple of comments on who we've engaged with and perhaps who we might be missing out on. So West Yorkshire, we learned, has a lot of much smaller farms. So many of those we've spoken to are family farms, hobby farms, or small holdings. And this is reflected in what we've heard, and this shouldn't be confused with the perspective of a large-scale intensive farm that you get more commonly perhaps in other regions. We want to acknowledge that all farms and farmers are different. The challenges of a dairy farmer are completely different to that of an arable farmer or a mixed farmer. And this means that they do have completely different experiences, relationships to nature, and ideas for the future. We'd also like to acknowledge that all land and landowners are different. Many have different policies, strategies, interests, and aims, and these are reflected in their different perspectives. Some of the things we're presenting today are generalizations, and there will be exceptions. Our insights communicate what's most commonly been shared with us throughout our engagement by the people that we've spoken to, but there is still nuances and very different perspectives amongst them. We also want to acknowledge that nature is, of course, a stakeholder too, with a voice in this conversation. Our brief, our commission has been to engage with landowners and farmers, but throughout the engagement, we have together continued to reflect on nature as a stakeholder and what we can do to better listen to the needs of nature. And finally, I keep saying finally, but finally, our task was to engage with farmers and landowners. And we quickly realized that landowners and farmers sit quite separately to each other with completely different interests and stakes in the future of a local nature recovery strategy. Farmers are typically people who live and work on their land and perhaps don't know how a local nature recovery strategy could impact them, but are looking for ways to improve the productivity and success of their land and lives. Landowners, on the other hand, are typically people or organisations who are looking after land or using land for another purpose, like water, leisure, or utilities. And they know that the local nature recovery strategy could impact how they do their job and are looking for clear strategic guidance and potential funding streams. What these two groups of stakeholders are looking for and how it will impact them by nature of who they are very different. And this is reflected in how we present our findings today and needs to be taken into account. Finally, we are still listening. I know Jen has put a comment in the chat, but I do want to emphasize that we're not at our final reporting stage today. So I do want to ask you to share your comments, opinions, and experiences in the chat, what you agree with, what you don't agree with, what you think is most important, so that we can keep this conversation moving and still learn when we're presenting our findings here today. So please feel free to comment in the chat, and those comments will be taken into account. And if you have any questions too. So we're finally getting to the juicy bits of what have we heard. We're going to begin by hearing from Nathan. Like we mentioned earlier, as part of our approach, we hired Nathan, who's a local young farmer from Howard, to help us engage with farmers. He's been hugely valuable and has really steered our decision making. So wanted to begin today by giving him the chance to share what it's been like from his perspective and what he's learned. Over to you, Nathan.
Hi everyone. Yeah, my name's Nathan Greenwood, and I'm from a small upland sheep farm near Haworth. I'm the fourth generation to live on our farm, and it's always been a big part of my life. From childhood, spent in days and weekends and school holidays in the fields and the lambing pens. Farming's always been a big part of my life, and I'm also very active in my local Young Farmers Club, where I'm currently the club secretary. And I feel very, very proud and very privileged to have grown up in such a strong rural community, and farming to me is right at the heart of that. It's a community that's given me a lot of opportunities over the years to grow and to develop, and I'm very grateful for that. And that's part of the reason I think projects like this are so important. And conversations like these are so important, because to me, farming isn't just about producing food or looking after the land. At its heart, it really is about those people who have been looking after our natural landscapes for centuries, and who really do have a voice that deserves to be heard. It's not always been the easiest project to work on. I think conditions in our industry are currently a lot harder than most outsiders probably realise. Over and over again, we've heard from members of the farming community who are struggling to sort of fight for both their business and for their way of life, in a landscape of sort of rapidly changing policy and economics. And the toll that's had on the mental health of some of the people we've met has been at times quite upsetting to see. But I've also been really proud of the resilience that many people have shown. Despite obvious struggles, we've met time and time again a community of people who are really passionate about what they do, who take really great pride in the service that they provide in keeping everyone fed, and actually still have a great deal of hope for the future. And not only that, I've been very surprised by just how passionate and how such a deep and genuine passion a lot of the people we've met have for nature, and the amount of local knowledge they have about what nature needs to thrive on their land. So, who else better to speak to about a local nature recovery strategy? We think there's a massive misconception sometimes that farmers don't really care about nature. But what we've heard is, in our region particularly, that farmers are often those who are most impacted by the changes our natural world is seeing, be that through severe weather, drought, climate change, flooding, or be that through sort of degradation of natural habitats and waterways. Farmers are often the first to feel those effects. And as a result, we've also seen that farmers really are passionate about finding solutions to these issues, but that they often feel that their voice is not heard and that their knowledge is ignored. And as a result, a lot of them actually feel that a lot of policies designed to promote nature miss the mark. So for me, this project, these conversations are really about bringing farmers together with policymakers, hopefully in a bit of a spirit of collaboration and a mutual willingness to compromise, so that they can build trust for the future, and West Yorkshire's LNRS can be something that, in 10, 20 years' time, we look back on as a policy that worked for farmers, worked for nature, and worked for everyone else, because there are a lot of people and groups who have a stake in protecting our natural environment.
Brilliant, thank you, Nathan. I'm going to now tell you 6 insights that we have heard from farmers across West Yorkshire. I will probably be echoing some of the things that Nathan has picked up on in his introduction there. So the first thing that we want to share with you is how important the culture, community and livelihood is to the people that we've spoken to. Yes, farmers want to make money, and yes, farmers want their farm to be successful and viable. But from what we've heard, it's also about sustaining heritage, culture, tradition, lifestyle, and community. If they were in it for the money, perhaps many of them would do something else. So we've heard that. Next slide, please. Farmers enjoy farming and want it to be a viable and sustainable job. Farmers believe in their way of life and want their culture and traditions to live on. They think that a threat to farming means a threat to farming culture, communities and livelihoods, and this brings great worry and sadness. They want to hand their farm down to their children as a gift to be cherished and not a burden to overcome, and worry that it's become too difficult for young people to enter the industry as there's no land available to buy or support for new starters. I want to share with you a couple of quotes. This one on the left says, "Dad has been in farming since he was a small boy, working for his dad, who worked on the farm with his dad before him. It's in our blood, in our genes, and it's an integral part of who we are." And the one on the right, "I've got a full-time job as a builder, so the farm is just a hobby to me now because it doesn't make any money. Dad gave it to me, but he's 70 now, so doesn't do much farming, but sometimes we'll work together. It's a lot of work, but I want to keep the place going. We've been farmers for generations." The second point we'd like to make is that farmers are really proud of the food that they produce to feed the nation and want to be recognised for the contribution they make to society. We've heard that. Next slide, please. Farmers want food production to be seen as a priority. They worry about what will happen if there's a disaster or war if we're not so self-sufficient as a nation. They think that taking land away from food production for nature is a mistake, feel undervalued for the important role they play in feeding the nation. They care about public perception and want to be seen to be making a positive contribution. Don't understand how importing food from other countries is good for the planet or nature. and strongly believe that more food miles equates to extra carbon emissions, and that eating locally produced food is the best thing we can do for a healthy planet. I'll read a couple of quotes out that we heard as well. The one on the left says, "I think the bottom line is that food production comes first on any farm. It's too important a thing just to overlook the supply chain." In the middle, you've got the Defence Secretary saying that we are a pre-war generation and talking about conscription, and yet there is no focus on food security or how we would feed ourselves in the event of a war. And the one on the right says, "People seem to think that we're the bad guys, but we've always wanted to help. We feed people and look after nature, which is more than most." We also want to share with you a short clip from an animation series that the Young Farmers group that we did the pub quiz with have been making to share their passion for local food.
Think about local food so far.
I need to go home and tell Mum and Dad how it's good for the environment and good for our local economy too.
And you, Joe?
I think it's well quality.
Joe, you're a genius. How it's of great quality and keeps you feeling well was the last point I was coming on to. Sophie, you can now tell your parents exactly where the milk we produce is from.
Yes, the cows in that field.
And Joe, you can tell your parents where the egg I gave you came from.
Out of a hen's warm backside.
Exactly. And when the customer knows where their local food comes from, and the farmer knows the customer who's eating his produce, he'll strive to make it the best quality and the most healthy he can manage. And because local food don't have to travel, and it's much fresher, it don't need preservatives. So that's healthy too. Okay, you two. I think your bikes are just about fixed. There you go.
Thanks, Farmer Harcourt. We'll see you tomorrow when we come back with Mum and Dad to get some local food.
I'll tell them local food is like riding a bike. Good for the environment, good for us, and just like my pedals make the wheels go round, buying local makes the money go round too.
Well, just make sure you don't fall off again. Bye. Bye.
Bye!
Just wanted to make sure you could see the final credits there. If you do want to see more of these animations
Think about local food so far.
that share the views of the young farmers and some of their perspectives on local food, I will share the link because they have made multiple episodes on local food and it is really interesting to watch. Okay, so the third insight is that farmers are truly interested in supporting nature and have a lot of their own ideas around how they can help. So the people that we have met are really interested in supporting nature. Within the realm of the possible, whilst attempting to maintain a farm, a lot of farmers are already doing things to support nature, from protecting and nurturing ancient trees handed down from their grandfathers. Others are conserving and rewilding old quarries, and others are handing over rough land to wild flower meadows. Many, although opposed to nature recovery on the surface, are found to be secret agents supporting nature in their own ways with their own ideas and passion projects at home. So we've heard that farmers already do a lot to support nature and they see healthy nature equaling healthy farming, that being said on a small farm. They want to support nature in ways that feel right to them and their own land, have ideas about how they can support nature that don't fit into their existing support schemes. They want to understand more about the specific nature they can help in the region and the types of measures that would help. They want to be given more examples of successful nature recovery that works alongside farming. and they have knowledge and experience on what harms nature, like humans, dogs, predators, and flooding, and would like to hear their specific experiences being listened to. Here is another quote. It says, "I recently looked through my dad's work diary. He keeps notes of everything he does during the day. He writes in detail, and every year he records the first sightings of certain birds and animals like the swallow. Farmers are really connected to nature, and most people do not give them enough credit for how much they care about the landscape. They probably care the most out of anyone in society." And this is just one example of someone that we met who pays deep attention to the natural environment and really records it and researches it as a hobby, what they see on their land and when they see it. Okay, next slide. The fourth insight that we are sharing is that farmers have unique knowledge about their land and want appropriate decisions to be made about its future use. Next slide. So we've heard that. Farmers feel that taking prime agricultural land out of production for nature is wasteful, ignorant, and disrespectful. Farmers want to see non-agricultural and less productive land to be used to support nature first. Farmers want to see options to support nature that don't require them to sacrifice productive land. They feel that some schemes have had a negative impact on their experience of nature on their land, and feel that existing schemes feel too restrictive and aren't designed for land like theirs. A couple of direct quotes. The one on the left is, "It's important that these projects take place on the right sort of land. You need to be careful not to take prime arable land away from farming, especially in West Yorkshire, because there isn't that much out there." And the one on the right, "There's plenty of land for trees that wouldn't be appropriate for agriculture. We need to make more informed decisions about specific places, not just rewild everywhere." Okay, the fifth insight is that farmers face a lot of uncertainty and are confronted with a wide variety of overlapping and conflicting schemes. We've heard that farmers feel uncertain about the viability of their farms and what support will be available for them in the future. They feel uncertain about the changing climate conditions and the impact it will have on their farm. They feel unable to change the use of their land as it could have permanent and unpredictable impacts and feels too much of a risk. They feel unclear about which schemes are right for them and worry about making the wrong decision because of dual funding restrictions. Feel confused about why there are so many different schemes and strategies that appear to do a similar thing. They don't trust that schemes are well thought through and are waiting to find out what other farmers are going to do first before making a decision. Here are two direct quotes. The one on the left says that the problem we face is that there never seems to be a coherent long-term plan for farming anymore. If you pay a farmer to create a habitat for nature, you'll have to pay them to maintain it afterwards. And the one on the right, these schemes are full of unintended consequences and you have to be very careful about that. This new winter bird food scheme on the SFI pays twice what we pay to overwinter our sheep up north, so it doesn't take a genius to work out that that way of farming will be on its way out shortly. And finally, the last insight that we want to share with you around what we've heard most commonly from farmers is that tensions exist between tenant farmers and landowners when it comes to making decisions about nature. And this is really, really important. So we've heard that, next slide, please. Tenant farmers worry that if landowners can make more money out of nature than they can out of renting their land to farmers, that they may evict them. Some people have seen examples of farmers being evicted from their land to make way for nature recovery, which impacts the family and the community. They need support to help work with landowners to develop mutually beneficial projects that support nature. And they would like to do more for nature, and some would like to do more for nature, but are unable to make those decisions because they don't own the land. Some direct quotes around what we've heard. The one on the left says, "I really worry that this push towards nature will result in thousands of tenant farmers being kicked off their land just so some rich landowner can make a little more profit." The one on the right says, "We made plans to plant wildflower meadows on parts of our land, but it never happened because our landowners didn't give us permission." Next slide. So those are kind of overarching insights. There's a lot there, a lot to kind of run through, but all really, really, really important points and shared with us with a lot of honesty. So I hope we've kind of shared with you that honesty too there. We do have a couple of summary statistics. So 71.7% of some of our survey responders said they'd already undertaken some form of nature recovery activity in the past. 64.2 were interested in exploring nature recovery activities on their land, and 56 of survey respondents told us that they had really specific ideas for nature recovery activities that they would like to implement on their land. Those numbers kind of surprised us in terms of there's a lot of people out there who have already and want to do stuff to recover nature. Some more statistics on the next slide. So the measures that people were most interested in trying were planting wildflower strips to aid pollinators and adding field signage to communicate to the public the work that they're doing to support nature. The least favoured interventions, surprise, surprise, were blanket measures such as large-scale tree planting and renewable energy activities that permanently change the land use. The most common forms of support that people needed were financial support and advisory assistance. And the most common barriers to people undertaking nature recovery activities were a sense that farms are too small to sacrifice land for nature, a lack of positive examples within the farming community, and a lack of appropriate funding. Feedback break.
Great, thanks so much, Sophie. There's so much in there, really, really interesting stuff. We would just like to invite people to have a couple of minutes break, to get up, to have a shake about, to get a glass of water or a cup of tea. And it would be really great if you could put in the chat anything that's really kind of stood out to you from what you've already heard so far, anything that you think you really agree with, anything that you'd like to add that you think that might have been missed there, or any questions that you'd like to ask as well. We'd be really keen to hear any of those. So if we meet back in just a couple of minutes, that would be brilliant.
Shall we call it? Not a very chatty chat. That's okay. Shall we hand over to you, Claire, for
Yeah, that's great.
all right then.
Yeah, thank you. I just find that, clearly I've heard some of this before as we've been doing run-throughs, but I just feel like it's so interesting and really powerful to hear from the farmers themselves. So thanks for that run-through again. So hello everybody, I'm Claire Bastin from Nifty Sustainability, and as Sophie said in the introduction, we've been working on we soon worked out that we need to approach farmers and landowners in different ways and use different methods and different approaches to make sure that we were really capturing the different perspectives and the different kind of views on nature recovery and the potential for the strategy. So we did that, and we can move on to the next slide, I think, Philippa. So yeah, we did that. The next one, please. We started by kind of mapping who the other landowners in West Yorkshire are. As Sophie said, we know there are loads of small farms and across the region, but the rest of the land is sort of broken up between, we know that it's local authorities, some other public sector organisations like the NHS, utilities, NGOs, charitable organisations, universities, and some others that we approached but haven't yet engaged with around the larger private estates, leisure facilities, the grouse moors, and so on. So the way that we approached this then was to try and, once we'd mapped those organisations, we then looked to find people in those organisations that had roles and responsibilities that related to nature. So, for example, people with interest in nature, biodiversity and the land, ecologists, rangers, biodiversity officers, as well as strategic leads and people with responsibilities for potentially for embedding nature recovery and delivering those wider sort of sustainability goals. And then also, and quite often these were all the same people, I have to add. It was, the same people or one person in an organisation might have all of these roles. So also the operational leads, the people who manage the day-to-day or have day-to-day responsibility for project delivery as regards to nature, biodiversity and land management. So what did we hear? We have kind of 5, I guess, kind of key features coming out of the findings and our discussions. So we asked people in particular to kind of think about what their role is with regard to nature recovery. We asked what their organisation's role was and how that fits with their own role. We asked them to share any existing examples of either biodiversity, nature recovery, and good practice. And as with farmers, some of the challenges that they face in doing that. And then we kind of rounded up with thinking about how the local nature recovery strategy might support them, or what they would like to see in the local nature recovery strategy. So 5 key things that we found then. We can move on to that next slide. Thank you, Philippa. Just starting off with thinking about one of the things that really came through very strongly was about the importance of this local focus. So as Justin said in his introduction, there's going to be 48 local nature recovery strategies. And this local feature just came across really strongly, that there's a potential for real benefit in having that kind of joined up approach. So Philippa, we can go to the next slide, please. So yeah, and in doing this, it's really about creating potential or opportunities for these strategic alliances that are focused on nature in the region. And this will create potentially new opportunities for managing existing nature corridors and creating new nature corridors, really strengthening opportunities for partnerships, working, which in turn then strengthens the potential for nature recovery. And a slight sort of change to this is that, or a slight kind of different angle, is that whilst the West Yorkshire focus is right, it really does need to be connected to the wider region. Clearly, nature doesn't know any boundaries in the same way as policy does, and so having that kind of connection with other regions is going to be important. And that the LNRS, as it develops, should connect with all those other wider developments that are going on in the region. And particularly, there was a lot of mention of housing and the bigger infrastructure projects. So we've got a couple of quotes just to illustrate this. I won't read them all out necessarily, but really wanted to pick up on a couple from the local authorities where they've said, you know, they can look across the whole region to see where the need is and who can do what. So that kind of local approach but connected approach can help to not just to strengthen the existing kind of partnerships, but see where the focus needs to be to move forward and to develop nature recovery strategies. And this, I found this really interesting, that the you know, that biodiversity, nature recovery is on the agenda, and somebody from a local authority said this is the first time in a long time that all the different agencies and local authorities are coming together to work on solutions, which felt really powerful, that it's around nature, it's around something that's potentially new and exciting. There's a lot of enthusiasm for that. So okay, I think we can go on to the next slide. So the second point then is, and kind of follows on nicely from that, but that a joined up approach that is strategic around the kind of guidance and resource that's likely to be needed for nature recovery is going to be important. Yeah, next slide, please. So this joined up strategic approach really comes from a place where currently there's very little dedicated resource for nature recovery or for biodiversity. We had a few, we heard a few comments about biodiversity net gain potentially improving that, but still it's only for particular types of developments. So there's very little existing resource, and other priorities really compete in the same space for resource and for time and for on the agendas. So things like carbon emissions, net zero targets, they're currently very high on the agenda. So LNRS has this potential to support this, you know, to focus attention and to focus resource and to act really as an evidence base to strengthen the business case or funding for nature recovery. Lots of comments from people about working with NGOs and other partners in strategic ways is helping, but helping to make the most of resources, but that it's not enough. And that this strategic approach to resources should help to strengthen that. The landowners that we spoke to definitely said that they would like a joined up approach to resourcing projects because, and this is part of the next point, that money is important, but so are the other types of support resources such as guidance and evidence, and so it's that joined up approach that will help to strengthen that. And just a couple of quotes, one from a utility company: we're starting to build a strong evidence base around what we already have, and this strengthens the potential for a more strategic approach to partnership working. And one from the public sector, that we have no extra resource for biodiversity, so we have to demonstrate how we fit with wider agendas. We're making progress on this, but hope that the LNRS will help. And then just quickly, another one, yeah, this it says there, this quote is from an NGO, but we also had, we heard this from local authorities. We desperately need more boots on the ground. So rangers, people with expertise who can provide advice to farmers and landowners. And again, this is with the sense that this is joined up advice. This is a strategic kind of approach to it. And it's not just about money, but money is important. Local authorities are struggling across the board. We need a joined up approach which will help us to access private finance opportunities. Okay, so then the third point is that landowners have different and often competing priorities for land use, and recovering nature needs to be integral to those. So as Sophie said when she was talking through some of the points from farmers, this is a real challenge. This is something that is at the forefront of lots of people's minds when thinking about nature and nature recovery. So can we have the next slide? Thanks. So this is really it's a really critical point that it's important not to shy away from the scale of the significant challenges around habitat and biodiversity loss, and that as came out really strongly from the views of farmers, this one size definitely will not fit all in the strategy. It needs to be the strategy needs to support that decision making and opportunities for interventions that join up for nature, but that's not in a prescriptive way. It's essential that nature and biodiversity is integral and not an add-on, which makes it really challenging when you're looking at this sort of space of conflicting use of priorities for land use. And that point there that we heard from the farmers as well, you can't do everything with every patch of land, and so that's a real challenge and conflict there arises. We've heard from a couple of people or a couple of organisations, and certainly we've heard from the farmers' side that those relationships with tenants, farmers, and also leisure activities and wider communities need to be really, really carefully managed. I can't really understate this actually, how this came across, and that it's a difficult where the purpose and priorities for land have changed over time, and with the different focuses that different organisations have. So a couple of quotes there. So from a utility company, even where we own the land, we can't always do what we think is best for biodiversity because our tenants own the land rights. So for example, they might have sports facilities with public access. So if it's a sensitive habitat that's potentially home to a rare species of plant or animal, they can't do anything about that to protect that. So, and again, similarly from a local authority, one of our biggest challenges is going to be meeting the recreation needs of an extra couple of million people in the region as we're building new houses. Biodiversity net gain will help, but it's going to be really difficult. Yeah, I think I'll move on to the next one because we've covered that point. So there's lots already happening, but it's important not to lose sight of the scale of the challenge. Similar to, as Sophie said about farmers, there's lots of little pockets of activity that are really interesting. I had lots of examples of really, really good stuff. And what was encouraging as well is there's a genuine urgency and enthusiasm around these projects and around nature recovery. So on the slight other side of that is that it's really important to know what we've already got and what's working and what isn't. So monitoring and an important early step being to understand what we already have in West Yorkshire and to protect that, and then to again work across the region and with other region with partners to share that learning. We've heard quite a lot about these kind of, the smaller and diverse projects are essential, but there's this kind of need to, in some way, join that up for the landscape scale solutions. That doesn't mean, again, the kind of one size fits all, but just making sure that these are connected Yeah, and then I've got on the next slide. So these are just some examples and some photos of projects that are already going on in the region. And perhaps if we can play the quotes. So this is from a university.
We have a plan in place for trying to aim for a really ambitious target for biodiversity net gain by 2030. I'm hoping that'll be around 30% across all of our estate. This will be challenging, but we're already on the journey and can see improvements in loads of areas. Things such as relaxed mowing, planting for diversity, so beehives as well, and creating habitats on campus, which are seeing incredible results from, as well as some of our bigger projects. For example, the Roger Stevens cooling pond on the city campus has been transformed into a new habitat and promoter for biodiversity, which is used for scientific research and teaching. We've also worked in partnership with the Environment Agency and Leeds City Council on our Boddington Field site to create a living lab that demonstrated a variety of natural flood management interventions that are being implemented across the upper air catchment as part of the Leeds Flood Alleviation Scheme. And on the university farm, we've set aside land and are trialling things like different varieties of grasses for pig feed that are more diverse and more potentially more robust.
And I think that final point really leads into the a kind of final key observation, which is around the importance of and the value of education, guidance, and shared learning. So we've heard from lots of people that when people are involved in nature recovery, they are more likely to feel connected. And there's a real appetite and need for people to connect with nature. But clearly some places are more suited to this than others. So it's back to that point about dual purposes. What everybody's spoken about across the board really is that they want to see examples of what's working in other places. So they want to see what's happening, what's working well, and to share learning, their own learning about what's happening on their land. There was a lot of openness, a lot of transparency about that. And to the point on the recording, that some different types of landowners are much more able to trial and test different options than others, and to share that learning, build capacity. Final couple of points there, that is, again, this touches on resourcing, that volunteering is great as a way of connecting people, but it's not enough to build capacity that we need to deliver those nature recovery goals. And that we do need to do a lot around skills and knowledge building, connecting with schools, universities, as well as having rangers and agents to give advice. So just a couple of quotes on that. I think we've heard that one, actually. That's very similar to the one in the recording. But working with volunteers and getting people involved with habitat creation helps create connections and understanding. It really works when people can say, I planted that. And the point from the local authority there, that we have a shortage of green skills across the region, and schools and colleges and universities ready to train them up. So wouldn't it be great if we could make that a key feature of the LNRS? Okay, so yeah, I think we're on to having another quick feedback break. So thanks for that.
Brilliant. Thanks, Claire. Loads more information in there, and we've got some really nice comments coming up in the chat, which is great. So please do, we'd welcome your reflections and feedback on the findings from the landowners, anything that stood out, anything you can add, anything you really agree with, we'd be really keen to know, and any questions that you've got. We're gathering the questions together. We've got 10 minutes at the end where we'll get those answered, and some of these comments as well. So please do keep adding, and feel free to get up and have another stretch, shake, get another cup of tea.
I could warm the one that I've got that's gone cold.
Okay, I'm going to move us on because I'm a stickler for time. If you do have any comments, like Jen said, please put them in the chat, and we do have 10 minutes to run through them at the end and answer your questions. But now we've got to our kind of principles for the future. So bearing in mind everything we've heard from all of the people we spoke to, what do we think this means for the beginnings of the local nature recovery strategy, and how can the West Yorkshire Combined Authority really have the thoughts, experiences and knowledge of farmers and landowners in the centre of and the foundations of their developing strategy. Many of these things that we've kind of spoke about and touched on today might not, the local nature recovery strategy might not be able to impact. Of course, the local nature recovery strategy can't make food, for example, more of a national government priority. Of course, the local nature recovery strategy can't give farmers more certainty about their grain prices or future subsidies. But the local nature recovery strategy can empathise really sensitively with these perspectives and have the lived experiences of farmers and the ambitions of landowners at the forefront of the strategy. So with this in mind, through listening to these experiences, we've put together these 6 principles that we hope that the LNRS could grow from. These are still developing today, and we are interested in hearing continual feedback before we finalise them for our report. I'm going to hand over then to Nathan, who's going to share these principles with you.
Yeah, all right. Hi, everyone. So our first principle here is celebrate action and inspire others. From both what Sophie and Jen have, Claire has said today, we've spoken to loads and loads of people who are already doing a lot of very inspirational stuff to support nature. And what a lot of those people want is just a little bit of recognition. So part of our principles for the future is to celebrate what's already there, and also use it to inspire others by showing them that, these people who do little things in isolation, they're part of a bigger movement, and also offering them, when we do come across these good examples of things that people are doing for nature, celebrate them in a way that allows others to see them and be inspired by them and use them as case studies, because that will open up a variety of different ways of helping nature in the region, and not just sort of 1 or 2 small measures. Now, the second one is to work from the bottom up and to be flexible. So we've heard time and time again that there's a wealth of local knowledge out there, and one of our key principles for the LNRS is to take that knowledge on board and be flexible enough to adapt where that knowledge says, yes, we're doing this right, or where, more importantly, that knowledge says, perhaps we just need to change tact a little bit here. Because there's so much of that knowledge on the ground, and a lot of that is deeply rooted in history. Some of these farmers, some of these landowners have been on their land for generations. I know my family have been on our farm for 4 generations. And so, that resource of local knowledge is a really strong resource to build an LNRS upon. And that fits into as well that flexibility of several people that we've spoken to. In fact, a great number of people we've spoken to have their own ideas of sort of very specific projects that they would like to do on their land to help nature, based upon what they know the nature around them needs to thrive. And so a great principle of flexibility allows things like that to be encompassed. Our third principle for the future is all about building skills and knowledge and capacity to allow us to help nature. We've discussed tonight there are significant challenges in getting this off the ground and really making the big differences for nature. And one of them is a lack of skills. So how can the LNRS focus on ensuring that they have the people on the ground with the right skills to be able to sort of guide that enthusiasm that a lot of landowners and farmers have for helping nature? Our fourth principle for the future is that the LNRS could create opportunities for peer-to-peer collaboration. It's something I've always taken for granted, but working with people like Sophie who haven't come from a farming background, we have such a strong sense of community amongst landowners and farmers in West Yorkshire. And that, again, is a really strong resource, a source of knowledge and a source of expertise that the LNRS could draw upon. And also what we've learned is that people really influence people. A lot of these people are willing to do things, but they want to see examples from their peers of where things have worked well, on even things where things haven't worked well, to alleviate fears on that side of things. So it's really about recognising the need to use those resources and to foster that collaboration, that partnership, not just between farmers and landowners and farmers, but between wider stakeholders and indeed within wider regions. You know, we've spoken about tonight that nature doesn't respect boundaries, and so it's all about making sure that these interventions link up to something bigger, be that with LNRSs elsewhere or with several different projects within West Yorkshire, because the more linked up these projects are, the more room there is for nature to thrive. Our penultimate principle for the future, it's a really simple one actually, but I think it's one of the most important up there. It's just to be clear, honest and informative. You know, we've spoken a lot about the uncertainty, particularly that farmers face. But in almost all these cases, farmers and landowners essentially are just different words for businessmen and women. You know, and all these people that we speak to, what they really want is as much information as possible on the side of, you know, what nature do we value? Are we trying to promote marshlands? Are we trying to promote woodlands? Are we trying to promote ground nesting birds? What are the key priorities there? And getting that across early, we think is very important. But it's also clear about where this is going in the long term. Where are sources of funding likely to come from, and what's likely to be the longevity of that funding, because that's really going to impact these individuals' businesses, and from that, you know, they need that information to be able to plan and to be able to get on board with any nature recovery initiatives. And then our final principle for the future is to harness a something is better than nothing approach. And what that basically means is that the LNRS could really benefit from recognising that in a lot of areas, land has several competing land uses, and helping nature is only one of those. Now, be that residential, or be that things like food production on farms or recreational land on some of your bigger estates, nature recovery activities will likely have to work in a way that works with them, and often those other land uses will limit the scale of nature interventions that can take place on those lands. The LNRS could benefit from saying it's not all about bigger scale projects, and having that flexibility in terms of scale, you know, be that small scale projects, be that things going on in the margin. So whilst, you know, in an ideal world, we might think of big areas being put back to nature, but we might actually benefit from several smaller things, and certainly will benefit more from something being done for nature than, you know, if there's only a focus on big scale, nothing being done at all. So those are our 6 principles for the future. But as Sophie says, they're still very much a work in progress, and we're very keen to hear your views on those because they are still very much adaptable.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Nathan. That was really lovely. Just something that follows straight on from that, one of the questions in the chat from Anne, she was asking about whether there are these spaces for farmers, landowners to work directly on these strategies, and whether that's something that is coming out of our recommendations. I don't know if any of you would like to speak to that.
I can, and I think it would be really well placed if you also did, Claire. I mean, throughout our engagement, we have heard huge amounts of people wanting to be part of this peer-to-peer networking opportunity to share skills and knowledge amongst themselves, but also with policymakers to inform leadership decision making moving forward. There's a huge appetite for that, because also what we've kind of been hearing is there's a lot of trust within peer-to-peer networks, and once one person does it, another person wants to be involved, and the kind of snowball effect happens. So yeah, a huge amount of ambition to be part of peer-to-peer networking and inform leadership decisions in policy moving forward. Claire, I don't know if you have anything to add.
Yeah, I was just thinking about, so we've had some conversations with West Yorkshire Combined Authority about one of the deliverables from this piece of work being around setting up what we're loosely calling a kind of pioneer group. So a group of people who can be there to trial things and inspire others, share their own learning, and help to drive the development of the strategy, but then the implementation of the strategy beyond that. So I think from this evening and from our other research, we're kind of pulling that together to make some recommendations about what that might look like. The intention would definitely not be that it's a kind of another steering group, but that it's a what thinking and doing kind of group that can get on with stuff and as we say, sort of share learning and be part of that peer-to-peer collaboration that we've talked about.
Brilliant, thank you. I just wanted to get that one in there because it followed on very nicely from Nathan's last bit there. So we've also got lots of comments in the chat. Alexis has put in loads that's really relevant and interesting, and is keen on some case studies from this that could potentially be shared with the NHS, and she suggested podcast might be a really nice way of doing that. So we'll definitely consider that. And then ideas around it. So she was at the Nature North conference this week, and she said that there's so much capitals, so much money that could potentially help farmers with the nature recovery and look at alternatives. So that could be a really interesting avenue to look at. She's talked about the frustrations around ponds. I know you mentioned, Claire, restoring ponds in your presentation, and she talked about the fact that one of the frustrations is around not being able to do that without planning permission. I think I've understood the comment. And then around kind of biodiversity and looking at where can farmers go for ecological assessments, baselines, guidance, that kind of thing, and thinking about what species might be best to focus on in terms of nature recovery, and perhaps using red lists for that, looking at endemic species, and lots of different financial opportunities as well. And she's mentioned yellow rattle, said that that's worth more than gold this year. So loads of really useful information in there. A couple more questions. So Anne was asking whether, in terms of the methods, whether you found barriers in engaging farmers that might have been different to other groups that you've worked with in the past. So I thought that was quite an interesting one.
It's a really interesting one, and yeah, we've definitely learned a lot. Big thanks to Nathan for working with us. We've had to adapt an awful lot. Obviously, they're outside a lot. They don't sit down in the morning at their computer like I do and answer emails. So a lot less kind of contact digitally. You can't just often send a survey link, or this online event has also come with challenges. It's been really important as a principle for us to be out there amongst people for as much time as possible throughout. And I think that was one of our main driving principles from the beginning, just spend as much time out there meeting people on the ground and speaking to them face to face. Another challenge, I think, that something is I feel like perhaps farmers aren't comfortable or used to being asked some of these questions, especially around their experiences of support from the combined authority and what more support they can get in the future. There's a huge amount of lack of trust there, and sometimes they're not expected to be asked these questions, which is challenging when you're doing engagement, because you've then got to do a lot of pre-work to get them to a stage where they trust you enough to share their experiences with you. So that's been hugely challenging. But again, having Nathan on our team has been really, really helpful. Philippa or Nathan, I don't know if you have any other reflections on the challenges we've had throughout our engagement.
Yeah, I think one thing that we found that actually me and Sophie working together has overcome quite well is that a lot of farmers don't generally mix with many people outside of the farming world. And there can be a little bit of suspicion and a little bit of distrust to people from outside. I think, me and Sophie have found that we've worked very well at a lot of events because I make sure I dress in my most farmery outfit and I talk like a farmer because I am a farmer. But Sophie can stand there and ask the questions that perhaps are a little bit too obvious to someone within the farming community that I would perhaps look silly asking, but Sophie as an outsider gets away with. I think that combination of having someone within the community alongside someone who's got that bit of distance has worked really well for us. And just like Sophie says, digital literacy, not just about so that they're not sat down at a computer. The average age of a farmer in this country is 62, and just a huge proportion do not have any digital skills, and far less than the average 62-year-old. A significant number of farmers we've spoken to still have a Nokia brick-style phone, and they don't do anything on the computer. They have a secretary or a family member who deal with all the digital side of things. They simply don't have the skills. So that is another barrier that I think we have found when dealing with people.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. And just wanted to mention that we have the CEO of Transform Harvest Consultancy with us this evening. Hello. And they help finance sustainable farming projects, so that could be a really nice, useful link up. There's just one question that isn't unanswered. I don't know if we've got time, but Anne was asking about whether much came up around authority, enforcement, and legal frameworks. So I don't know if anyone can speak to that really quickly before we get on to what happens next bit.
I can very quickly say that there have been questions about it. I don't know whether they have on the farmer side, but perhaps that's one question that we can take back to WICA, and then when we give our feedback, just include that.
I think from our side, the two things that come to my mind are that we have spoken to quite a few people who want there to be checks and enforcement to make sure that work is being carried out properly. But there's also very much an appetite for sort of the new style of DEFRA enforcement, where it's more based on evidence of proving you've tried and that you're working towards creating habitat, rather than the sort of older way of working of a punishment style system when things haven't worked. I think there's a real appetite for that flexibility and that sort of working with it rather than against farmers.
Brilliant. So we have 2 minutes left. I'm going to leave you with Justin from West Yorkshire Combined Authority sharing with us a couple of minutes on what happens next.
So just thinking about next steps. So we've done a lot of work so far on engagement and consultation, and also like data collation. I think, as many of you could imagine, there's a lot of mapping and digitization that's required to understand what the current position is. So we've done a lot of work on that so far. We're still very much in that kind of data collection and stakeholder engagement phase. But then hopefully we'll be moving on to provide kind of options for consideration and consultation in the future, and then hopefully moving all forward to a draft consultation in kind of early next year. And these are just very briefly some of the milestones that we're going through. So we're very much at the start of the journey now. So it's the kind of lighter green shade at the bottom of the screen. going through kind of mapping existing priority areas, stakeholder engagement, and then through that we need to start prioritising which habitats and species are most important from a West Yorkshire point of view, and then kind of thinking about that, consulting on it, and then moving towards a draft consultation document at the back end of this year, and hopefully a final publication broadly kind of summer 2025. And finally, I think thank you for all your time and contributions through this webinar, but also the work that's been undertaken with the team that's been supporting us. It's very valuable kind of input to the piece of work. Is needed. That input is coming in right at the very beginning of this process, and it will shape the considerations that we make moving forward. So thank you for your input, and enjoy the rest of your day. So just thinking about
Okay, we also want to say thank you for coming this evening. Like we said, we will share answers to the unanswered questions and log your really valuable comments as part of our research too. If you do have any more questions, then my email address is here, so please do be in touch. And again, thank you very much for coming.